Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gary Baumgarten, but I suspect you already know that. And I welcome you to this discussion on Facebook Live, on paltalk.com, and on YouTube. You know, we're all hoping for a vaccine that will save the day from the COVID-19. And in fact, today there's breaking news out of Oxford University in the United Kingdom. They're reporting significantly, I guess I'm being superfluous here, results, very encouraging results. They tested a vaccine on about 100,000 or 200,000 people, and they're very, very happy with the results because they build up an immune system. I don't know the epidemiology of it all, the science of it all, but I can tell you the headlines, and this is very much encouraging news. But not to throw cold water on all of this, there's a chance if we move too quickly toward the vaccine that it can actually backfire on us and cause more problems than it resolves. We have with us today the former I got him both as the former associate director of the FDA and professor in this title, a little typographical error, but both are true. Peter Pitts, who is the president of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest, and he's going to tell us all about how the vaccines actually, if we're not careful, can actually hurt us. Professor Pitts, welcome to the discussion today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming with us. And I guess we do need a bit of a reality check. We all want this to happen very, very quickly. We know vaccines, though, in general, take a long time to develop, to test. We have to not only do it in the lab as they have at Oxford and other places, but we also have to then become human guinea pigs, and they have to be used on large swaths of the population before we know how successful they are. And if we're not careful, you are telling us, there's a chance that it could actually backfire and hurt us.
That's the difference between rushing and expediting. When you rush, you cut corners and you make mistakes. And when it comes to medical products, and certainly vaccines, that's never acceptable. If that happens, you give people vaccines that don't work, it doesn't solve the problem. It can make the virus stronger. Viruses mutate, they learn about vaccines, and if they're weak, they can learn to beat it. But what we need now is patience. We need to expedite, we need to bring the smartest minds to bear and make sure that there's no time and treasure that is not put against this proposition. The news out of Oxford, as you mentioned, is very promising. This vaccine seems to build up very strong antibodies. They last for a while. That's good news. That's exactly what we want. And the next phase is to test it in large-scale human trials. So I'm looking for a vaccine that's been approved by the FDA early in 2021. And that's really fast. Just to put it in perspective, vaccines generally take more than 5 years to get done. So this really is a warp speed proposition. But the danger is we do it wrong and actually set the clock back and also allow people to lose faith with public health authorities, which cannot be allowed to happen these days, whether it's masks or vaccines.
So this has happened before. This is not just hypothetical. When it came to MERS and SARS, they did release vaccines prematurely.
That's right. And when that happens, they don't work, the virus gets stronger, and people lose faith in the public health authorities. We don't have that opportunity here. We've got to get it done right. We've got to get it done right the first time, and we can't sit on our hands. We've got to bring every available resource to bear. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is very promising. There are a couple of vaccines in the US by Pfizer and Moderna that also look very promising. But again, you've got to do it right. You've got to go through the process to make sure what you get at the end of the day really is just going to kill this virus and kill it dead. Otherwise, we're right back to where we started.
So how does that happen that it doesn't always work with the antibodies?
Well, this is science, and every time they develop a new vaccine, it's an experiment. They're different, made of different things. They attack different parts of the body. They produce antibodies in different ways. That's why it's important to make sure that it actually works in humans and in large-scale human studies to boot. I mean, some of the science that's happening now out of Oxford as well as the US is brand new science relative to vaccines, and that's why it's able to happen so quickly. And that's another reason why we've really got to be careful. This isn't the annual flu vaccine. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for years. This is a new virus, and the vaccine is being developed in new cutting-edge scientific ways. So we've got to get it right. We can do it fast, but we can't cut corners. We've got to go through the process. Otherwise, we're going to be behind the eight ball.
So there are some experimental vaccines that are already out there, and already we know that some of those vaccines, former Associate FDA Commissioner Peter Pitts, have been problematic already.
That's exactly right. I mean, I'll give you an example. In China, they're inoculating their military with an experimental vaccine, and it's causing problems. I don't think anybody should be used as a guinea pig, least of all soldiers who aren't being asked to act as lab rats. That's why these studies in the West have to be very carefully controlled and done right, because in addition to the clinical issues, which are huge, you have ethical issues, which you can't simply wish away. You've got to do it right, and you've got to do right by the people who are allowing themselves to be clinical trial patients.
Yeah. So I understand that we're talking a little bit about Oxford and then how promising that is, but there are a lot of people, it's almost like a race to the finish line. And I hate to put it that way, but that's pretty much what's going on because we're so anxious for a vaccine. There are a lot of different researchers throughout the world who are working on this, and they're taking different approaches. And I think that's probably a good thing, isn't it?
It sure is. It's kind of the hidden victory of this whole process. You have the biopharmaceutical industry, a global industry. You have government healthcare ministries and experts. You've got academia, all working together with their eye on the prize of one thing, which is a COVID-19 vaccine. And people say to me, well, who's going to win? Who's going to get the first vaccine? Is it going to be an American vaccine? And I'll give you the answer. It doesn't matter. I want a vaccine that's approved, that's safe and effective as quickly as possible. I think at the end of the day, if competition is going to drive people to do things better and smarter and in new ways, I'm all for that. But at the end of the day, if it's a British company, if it's an American company, I don't care. I want a vaccine that's done right, that's done quick, that works, that can then be manufactured to scale and given to the American public. And that's another issue too. Not only does the scientific community need to develop a vaccine, which is hard enough, then they've got to figure out ways to manufacture to scale. And now we're talking billions of doses. So that's another issue that the industry has to kind of begin to think about. It's hard. There are not a lot of vaccine manufacturing plants all around the world. And then it gets even more difficult because we've got to figure out who gets vaccinated in what priority order. Clearly, you want people who are most at risk to get vaccinated first, older people, people with pre-existing healthcare conditions, respiratory conditions. But who comes next? Police officers, firefighters, teachers, students, essential workers, transit workers, and who makes those decisions? In the U.S., generally speaking, the Centers for Disease Control has a committee called the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP. And they're the ones that are thinking right now about who gets vaccinated first, second, third. But should it be a federal decision? Should it be a state decision? Should it be a city decision? Should it be a personal decision? These are very important conversations, and we need to have them and finish them and agree on them before a vaccine is ready.
The guest is Peter Pitts. He's a professor and the former Associate FDA Commissioner, and he is the president of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest. What happens if I take a vaccine? Excuse me. Wow, that tasted good. A vaccine that actually is weakened, and then I do get the coronavirus.
Well, then you've allowed the virus to mutate and figure out ways to beat this subpar vaccine, which is the worst of all possible worlds. The only thing worse than no vaccine is a vaccine that allows the virus to get stronger and mutate. So we've got to avoid that. And that's why the FDA has issued very strident guidelines as to what type of performance measures these new vaccines have to meet. And it's not easy. It is a relatively high bar, which is exactly what it needs to be.
We have seen, unfortunately, and you and I discussed this a little bit before we went to air, the politicalization of a health problem. And I'm not pointing fingers one way or the other, but as a result of this, there has been something that you discussed a moment ago, and that's an erosion of confidence in the medical and scientific community. A lot of sand is being thrown in our eyes by people for political reasons. Why should we be satisfied with what you're telling us about why we should take due diligence before releasing a vaccine? Why can we trust the FDA and the CDC and the World Health Organization and others who are working on this problem?
Unfortunately, it's even worse than that. It's worse than just saying, listen, vaccine seems to work, let's get it out there. There are about 30% of the US population, 27% by the polls that I've seen, people say they wouldn't even take a vaccine once it's approved. That's an enormous public health problem. And these aren't just anti-vaxxers. These are people, a lot of people in the communities of color that simply don't trust the government to do the right thing. And they need to be educated and convinced that the government is doing the right thing, is not being politically motivated. My big fear is that people fear that an FDA-approved vaccine has been approved too soon because of political pressure, and therefore it won't be either safe or effective. So that 27% goes to 30%, 40%, and upwards. We have to start, and right now, educating people, one, as to the importance of getting a vaccine, and secondly, the honesty and integrity and real civic commitment of the people that work in the U.S. government public health community. These people work hard, long hours, their pay is not terrific, and they are on almost religious missions to advance and improve the public health of the U.S., and that's tripled during the COVID crisis.
Well, to that point, I have a friend, I use him as an example all the time. He's a huge supporter of the president, and he would never, the bile would rise before he would vote for Joe Biden, but he 100% argues that to be dismissive of this virus is a very dangerous thing to do, and that some of the rhetoric that is being promulgated now by people, maybe because of political reasons, maybe just through sheer lack of real knowledge, because anybody has a bully pulpit today with social media. If you can get somebody to listen, you can tell them whatever you want to tell them. And and I know this is slightly off the topic, but the big issue is on the masks, how people say, well, you don't have to really wear a mask. And I've actually seen the argument that the jury is out whether the masks really protect oneself or the people around us. And I talked to this guy who, once again, is a huge Trump supporter, and he says, look, I wear a mask every day, and so do all my colleagues when we go into the hospital. Why do you think we do this? He gets very frustrated by the dialogue, the rhetoric that we're listening to today.
Well, unfortunately, right now we're living in a divided society, and it was divided before COVID. To my mind, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, if you're using the COVID-19 pandemic for political purposes, not to mix my metaphors, a plague on both of your houses. I think people out there are beginning to recognize that people that are politicizing COVID-19 are doing so for their own purposes, and as a result are kind of beginning to think what's really the right thing to do here. And masks is one thing. I live in New York City. You've got about 90% compliance with wearing masks. No one likes it. It's hot, but it's the right thing to do. And in places where the infection rates are spiking, they're not wearing masks. So this is not rocket science. This is a real cause and effect proposition. So anybody that's out there right now that thinks that wearing a mask is somehow an infringement on civil liberties needs to recognize that we live in a society where you give up some liberties for the greater good. And wearing a mask isn't just about keeping yourself safe. I hear people say, well, I'm willing to take the risk. And the truth is, it's not just about you. It's about you keeping yourself safe as well as keeping me safe. Because when two people wear a mask, you reduce the opportunity for viral transmission by 70%. That is a huge number that would be significant even if it was wrong by half. We've got to put politics aside. We've got to turn down the volume on the emotions and do the right thing relative to masks and about getting vaccines.
Former Associate FDA Commissioner, Professor Peter Pitts, who is the president of the Center for Medicine in the Public Interest. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise with us, and please stay safe. And I hope to have you on again. Maybe when they come up with a vaccine, it would be a good time to bring you on to talk about whether it's, or when they offer it for public trials. Should I try it? Should I roll up my sleeve?
I think that not. Enrolling in public trials is a public service. And I hope that I talk to you sooner rather than later about the successful vaccines we've got.
I hope so as well. And to everybody else who's listening, you stay safe as well. And as I like to say at the end of our discussions, peace out.